At 2:03 p.m., the show began. Jake jogged out onto the wet platform, waving to the cheering audience. The loudspeakers boomed his name. Canuck surfaced beside him to thunderous applause, soaking the first 5 rows with a dramatic tail splash. It was a flawless opening. Then Jake dove in. The crowd erupted. It was the highlight of every performance. The trust dive. Trainer and Orca swimming side by side, a symbol of harmony between man and beast. Canuck swam around him once, then twice, slower on the second pass. Jake extended his hand, the signal for the synchronized spin. But Canuck didn't spin. He circled again, this time closer. His dorsal fin cut through the water like a blade. Jake smiled, still unaware. To the audience, it looked like part of the act. What they didn't see or didn't recognize were the subtle signs. Canuck's breathing quickened. His tail slapped the water once hard. His pectoral fins twitched out of rhythm, and then he vanished beneath the surface. Jake treaded water, scanning. The music played on. The crowd clapped, expecting the big jump. But Canuck wasn't preparing to leap. He was preparing to strike. At 2:08 p.m., the illusion shattered. Without warning, Canuck surged from below, launching upward with terrifying speed. He hit Jake mid-torso, driving him out of the water before slamming him down again with bone-crushing force. Witnesses would later say they heard a crack, not through the speakers, but with their own ears. The unmistakable sound of a body breaking under pressure. Then a scream, not from Jake, but from the crowd. Blood surfaced within seconds. At first, people thought it was part of the show, a special effect, a stunt. But as the water turned from clear blue to a dull red haze, the excitement shifted to confusion, then horror. Canuck didn't let go. He dragged Jake under, deep into the tank. The water stilled. 10 seconds passed, then 20, then 30. Suddenly, Jake's body broke the surface, limp, only for Canuck to grab him again, this time by the leg. Trainers on the deck were already moving. Alarms blared over the PA system. A staff member screamed, "Emergency protocol! Clear the pool!" Jake was underwater again. No air, no control, just raw force. A lifeguard sprinted for the emergency pole, a 10-foot aluminum rod used to distract whales in rare instances like this. 2 others rushed for the gate release to try and separate Canuck into the medical pool. But Canuck wasn't responding to cues. He ignored the buzzer, ignored the underwater tones, ignored the shouts. He wasn't playing. With horrifying clarity, it became evident. This was an attack. A trainer tossed a bait bucket into the water, a desperate attempt to redirect Canuck's attention. He didn't flinch. He surfaced just long enough for everyone to see Jake's body in his mouth. Still, barely conscious, arms outstretched toward the surface before being yanked under again. The crowd was being evacuated now. Children sobbed. Parents covered their eyes. Others stood frozen, paralyzed by what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a deviation from protocol. It was a complete breakdown. The whale was no longer under human control. Every second felt like a minute. Every failed rescue attempt chipped away at hope. Jake surfaced once more, barely. Blood streamed from his mouth, one eye swollen shut. And then, the final moment, Canuck performed what looked like a breach, leaping halfway out of the water and landing with Jake beneath him. The water exploded, then silence. No bubbles, no movement. Jake Lawson did not resurface again. The attack lasted 5 minutes. 5 minutes that would change everything. By the time Canuck sank beneath the surface with Jake's body, the stadium was in chaos. The crowd had been evacuated, but backstage, panic reigned. Protocols were supposed to prevent this. Emergency nets that could section off the tank, gates that isolated whales in seconds. But none of it worked. The gates jammed. The nets never deployed. Canuck remained in the main pool, circling slowly, dragging Jake's lifeless body behind him. Every few minutes, he surfaced, as if taunting the staff, as if asserting his control. Jake had now been underwater for more than 7 minutes. Finally, after repeated attempts and loud underwater signals, Canuck released him. The body floated to the surface, motionless. A dive team rushed in. They pulled Jake from the water and hoisted him onto the platform. His wetsuit was shredded. Blood poured from a deep gash along his ribs. One arm hung at an unnatural angle. His lips were blue. CPR began immediately. Chest compressions, rescue breaths, again and again. A paramedic on scene later said it was the longest 10 minutes of his life, trying to bring breath back into a man who had none left. At 2:41 p.m., Jake Lawson was declared dead. The official autopsy listed blunt force trauma to the chest and head, multiple rib fractures, internal bleeding, and drowning as the cause of death. But those who knew him, who had worked beside him for years, knew the truth went deeper. One former trainer, who asked to remain anonymous, later said, "He didn't stand a chance, and we knew Kanak had it in him. We all did. We just hoped it wouldn't come to this." Jake had trusted the process, trusted the whale, trusted the institution, and in the end, that trust cost him his life. News of Jake Lawson's death spread faster than the cleanup crews could drain the blood from the pool. By evening, national headlines read, "Veteran trainer killed by killer whale at Ocean World." Footage of screaming children and horrified parents flooded social media. Clips of the attack, shaky, grainy, but unmistakable, were picked apart on live streams, news panels, and talk shows. Outside the gates of Ocean World, the first candlelight vigil began less than 24 hours after the attack. Former guests, trainers, strangers. They gathered in silence, holding photos of Jake. Some wept. Others stood in the stunned disbelief. For them, Jake wasn't just another trainer. He was the face of Ocean World. The man who had made the whales seem gentle, safe, magical. Now that illusion had been shattered by the very creature he had spent his life trusting. Ocean World responded swiftly, at least on the surface. The park suspended Orca shows out of respect. Press releases were carefully worded. Phrases like tragic accident and unforeseeable event dominated the headlines. Spokespeople offered condolences. They promised internal investigations, promised change. But behind closed doors, a different story was forming. 2 weeks later, an internal government safety report was leaked to the press. The findings were damning. Over the past 3 years, Ocean World had violated federal safety protocols at least 12 times. Failures in gate mechanisms, unreported near misses, undertrained staff, animal behavioral red flags that were ignored or dismissed. Jake's own emails expressing concern over Kanak's aggression were part of the report. The public was furious. Animal rights activists took to the streets. Protesters lined up outside marine parks across the country. Hashtags calling for the end of orca captivity trended worldwide. Petitions gained millions of signatures in days. What began as a tragedy had become a movement. Jake Lawson's name was now more than a headline. It was a rallying cry for reform, for justice, for every trainer who had ever been told to smile through their fear, and for every animal confined to a tank that was never meant to live in one. Jake Lawson died doing what he loved, working with the animals he believed in, performing for the crowds he cherished, and trusting an orca he had spent over a decade calling a partner. But was his death preventable? The reports say yes. The ignored warnings say yes. The history, buried in paperwork and silenced trainers, says yes. What killed Jake wasn't just a 12,000-pound predator. It was negligence, repetition, a system that valued performance over precaution and silence over safety. Jake's sister, in a quiet interview after the funeral, said only one thing. He warned them. They didn't listen. Today, candles still sit outside Ocean World's gates. The show lights have come back on. But something changed that day. A question was planted, one the world still wrestles with. Are we protecting animals or using them? Are we honoring trainers or exploiting their passion? And how many more lives will it take before we choose to listen? If you were moved by this story, consider subscribing to the channel. We bring you true and untold animal attack documentaries, stories that deserve to be heard, remembered, and learned from. Like, share, comment below with your thoughts, and as always, stay curious, stay safe. We'll see